Hello everyone, I'm François from Shakmat. In this video, I will demonstrate how the Banshee Reach works. The Banshee Reach is a triangle core analog VCO with Thru-Zero capabilities and Varishape. So like I just said, it has a Thru-Zero phase modulation and frequency modulation input, 4 different inputs with independent square, so sine, and a Varishape, which is a result of a continuously morphing waveform, which can be crossfaded with a sub-octave generator. On this analog VCO, we added a digital control, which allows to freeze the coarse potentiometer and turn it into an octave switch. So no more accidental VCO detuning in live situations. Other features include LFO mode, differencing mode, PWM, and a digital noise modulation source, which turns the Banshee Reach into a pretty powerful noise source. The Banshee Reach has 4 independent outputs, which are the pulse, the saw, the sine, and a Varishape output. Let's first have a look on the pulse output. Right now, as you can see, we have a classic square waveform. The pulse width of this square or pulse can be controlled by CV. Let's feed this CV input with an attenuated LFO coming from an Harlequin's context. Let's increase the depth of the modulation. We can go from 99% to 1% pulse width. Second output is a classic sawtooth waveform. Third output is a sine waveform. And the fourth output is the vari output. The Varishape provides the results of the combination between a continuously morphing waveform from a sine to a triangle to a saw and to a square, and the square sub-octave generator. So let's first have a look to the shape function. And as you can see, we can morph through all the waveforms with continuous morphing. Of course, the shape parameter can be modulated by CV. To do this, we'll take the first channel of the Harlequin's context, which is a sine LFO. We can set the modulation amount thanks to the shape CV attenuator. Let's set the shape potentiometer, for example, at noon. The internal core of the VCO, which is a triangle, is normalized to the shape CV input, meaning without any cable inserted into the shape input, we can waveshape in a quite special way the shape output. As you can see, this feature leads to some original waveforms with peculiar harmonic content. Like we said earlier, the Varishape output provides a result of this continuously morphing waveform with a square sub-octave generator. By turning this potentiometer, we crossfade the morphing waveform with a sub-octave generator. Now we hear some sub-harmonics coming in. Here we have a -1 octave sawtooth. Sub-octave button and LED allows to choose between 3 different options for the sub-octave generator, which are -1 octave square wave, -2 octave square wave, and a -2 octave square wave with 25% pulse width. The sub-amount can be, of course, modulated by CV. Let's take again an LFO from the Harlequin's context. Let's now modulate both parameters, sub and shape, at a time. Last but not least, regarding the Varishape, is you can choose for the square wave a 50% pulse width, fixed pulse width, or a variable pulse width square wave like you have on the independent pulse output. Let's now have a look to the tuning control of the Banshee Reach. Let's listen to the Varishape output. Like in any VCO, you have a coarse setting of the tuning and a fine setting of the tuning, which has a range of minus to plus a semitone. In order to avoid accidental detuning of your VCO by turning by mistake the coarse potentiometer, which is quite a nightmare in live situations, it is possible to lock the coarse knob by pressing this button, and as a bonus, the coarse knob is now an octave switch. It is possible to store the tuning and the locking of the VCO, so you can set your VCO in studio and go play live with a precise tuning. We will see this feature later in the video. The tuning feature only concerns the potentiometers and does not affect the analog signal path of the frequency modulation input, which are totally analog. When unlocking the Octave function, you have to pass by the closest corresponding frequency in order to have the coarse potentiometer in control of the frequency. The Banshee Reach has three different inputs for frequency control, which are a classic exponential volt-octave input, like in any VCO, a Thru-Zero frequency modulation linear input, and a Thru-Zero phase modulation input. Let's patch first a sine coming from the Varishape output. Let's take a second sine coming from a second Banshee Reach and let's send it into the phase modulation input of the first Banshee Reach. As you can hear, we can achieve those classic FM tones. Again, it's a Thru-Zero phase modulation input, meaning it has more tendency to keep the harmonic content of the main VCO. So we can go to these more bellish, glassy tones. Let's use the normalisation of the triangle into the shape control to have a bit more harmonics. Let's have a try with different waveforms. Let's crossfade the waveform with the subgenerator. let's go back to a sine waveform now. The Banshee Reach has also a dedicated VCA for the phase modulation, thanks to the amount input. It's a unipolar 0 to 5 volt input, and let's control it with a modulation signal coming from a mod medusa. The Banshee Reach has a sync input, which can be set as a hard sync input or soft sync input. So we just made this patch. We have a first Banshee Reach we're gonna listen to in a few seconds. And then we have a second Banshee Reach. We send the square wave into the Mordax and then to the sync input of the first Banshee Reach. Sync mode on the first Banshee Reach is now in hard sync. So let's check what's happening. We have a saw coming out from the first Banshee Reach. So as you can hear, the second Banshee Reach is giving the main pitch as the first one. Control has more an effect on the harmonic content. So we have those classic sync sound we all know. So in hard sync mode, every rising edge received into the sync input will reset the wave at its beginning. It works very well with high harmonic content waveforms, such as saws and squares. Let's now have a look to the soft sync mode. To switch mode, press the LFO button for 2 seconds. Let's now switch to a sine waveform on the first Banshee Reach. Soft sync tends to produce less harmonics than the hard sync mode. This soft sync mode cause the waveform to go into a reverse direction. Let's now make a comparison for a sine wave with the hard sync. So like we said earlier, hard sync tends to produce way more harmonics. Next filter we are checking now is the disorder. Disorder will turn the Banshee Reach into an original noise source. It actually uses the digital control to modulate the VCO with audio rates random modulation signals. To turn the disorder on, just press for 2 seconds on the Octave button. When turning on the disorder function, the module remembers its tuning. The fine potentiometer acts on the color of the noise. We are now listening to a modulated sine waveform. With a sawtooth waveform we will have different harmonics content. You can still use the coarse VCO to have control on the base frequency of the VCO. Frequency and phase modulation inputs are still with the full analog signal path. While using the Varishape output you can still have a control of the harmonic content of the produced noise using the shape control and the suboctave amount. All the different outputs will give different type of noise with different harmonic content. Let's have now a quick review of all the different noise colors. With color potentiometer fully counterclockwise, it works very well with Sine. We have like a windy flute results. Let's turn the color potentiometer. We're now approaching like more digital white noise modulation. Again, you can use the chorus potentiometer to act on the base frequency of the VCO, or you can use a different frequency of phase modulation input to modulate the generated signal. Let's now switch to another color. We now have more pitched noise results. And when the color potentiometer is fully clockwise, we have this kind of results, working pretty well with high pitch squares. Now we have more digital error code type modulations. The Banshee Reach can be turned into a modulation source thanks to the LFO mode, which is accessed by pressing the LFO button. In LFO mode, the LFO button is turning red and green, green for positive voltages and red for negative voltages. Let's do a quick patch where one Banshee Reach in LFO mode will modulate the shape of a second Banshee Reach in VCO mode. What we see on the Mortax data is the LFO coming from the first Banshee Reach. Coarse and fine potentiometer act on the rate of the LFO. The vari output still provide the mix between a continuously morphable waveform and the suboctave generator. So you can obtain this kind of very interesting results. We can still use the normalisation of the triangle of the core of the VCO LFO into the shape input, so you have more special LFO waveforms. It is of course possible to modulate the rate by CV using the volt per octave or FM input of the Banshee Reach. You can still access the octave function. So in LFO mode, it means you're locking the frequency, the rate of your LFO, turning the chorus knob will now set the rate of the LFO to division or multiplication of the locked rate. In LFO mode, the disorder feature will add some randomness on the LFO rate, so you can press for 2 seconds the Octave button to activate the disorder function. The fine potentiometer will set the range of randomness sent to the rate of the LFO. As you can hear, lower color settings leads to a very subtle randomness. Let's increase the random amount. Note it is possible to combine the Octave function of the LFO with the disorder function, so you will only access to entire division of multiplication of the locked rate. Of course, all the other features such as PWM and different sync modes can be used in combination with the LFO mode. It is possible to store the current state of the Banshee Reach into a non-volatile memory, and this state will be remembered at startup. Storing the current state means storing the sub-octave waveform, the LFO mode, the sync mode, and the Octave and disorder function. Storing the Octave function means you will also store the locked frequency, so again, this is a very convenient way to store a precise tuning of your VCO in studio and then go live and start up your modular system with this precise tuning at startup. So let's set the module in a certain state. To store the current state, press for a couple of seconds on the sub button. The module just blinked to confirm the current state storing. Let's turn off and on the modular system. And as you can see, all the different functions have been stored. Thanks for watching and see you very soon. Bye bye.